what better place to start an adventure in search of a lost medieval city than the beautiful historic town of Rye. I don't actually remember seeing this old gatehouse here when we visited last year. But the aim today is to go to the ancient city, the medieval city I should say, of Winchelsea. Just further, well I was going to say along the coast, not the coast, and that's part of the story. We have the old walled medieval city of Winchelsea, built in, I think it was 1290, in the late 13th century anyway, by Edward I, a planned medieval city that replaced old Winchelsea, consumed by the waves. This is going to be an incredible journey that I am so excited about. Southern Rail did their best to stop me getting here today with train cancellations, so I'm quite a bit later than I hoped to be, but let's make the most of it. I can't wait to get going on the Saxon Shore Way, possibly coming back on the 1066 way. There's so much history here, it's incredible. That's where I picked up the pasty for my lunch. Question is whether it will survive the outskirts of Rye or not. There are so many beautiful old timber framed buildings here in Rye, and I made a video of a walk around Rye almost exactly a year ago with my wife, which will be linked to below. I think it's compulsory to include a shot of Mermaid Street, apparently Britain's most photographed street, although I did get some beautiful shots of Mermaid Street at sunset when I was here last year with Heidi. So we're here on the edge of the town. I'm going to just pop in the Heritage Centre, see what I can find, and then we're going to go down here, down Winchelsea Road, or Winchelsea Road, I keep calling it Winchelsea, and then Harbour Road. Now last time I did walk down to the harbour, but this time around we're going to branch off here towards a whole load of really fascinating sites. I can't wait. Look at this, perfect. So there shouldn't be any shortage of information once we get to the wonderful Winchelsea. Okay, we're going to turn down here but not go to Rye Harbour this time, turn off towards the military canal. I hope I find that turning, bound to, must be easy. And there's the Martello Tower that I missed last time. Just poking through one of the defensive structures. Hopefully we'll see a few more of those today, I think. And this is where we turn to walk alongside the River Breed here. Not the military canal just yet. That is slightly discouraging. But there, down the bottom here it does say, look, public footpath. It's quite occluded, but definitely there. I am fascinated by the whole idea and the history of the, I don't know the correct pronunciation, I'll put it up here. Cinque Ports is probably what we say, isn't it? Although it was French, so it would be Cinque Ports, I guess. And there is a really lame joke about the sinking of the Cinque Ports. Some of them anyway. And it is fascinating. And of course, Cinque being five harbours in French, the 5 harbours, and there were far more than 5 of them. I think there is an original 5. I'll list them on the screen here. Hastings, New Romney, mostly along the Kent and East Sussex coast. Rye was able to join the 5, as was Winchelsea. I have to keep saying it, Winchelsea. That's how I would say Winchelsea, but they say Winchelsea. Both Rye and Winchelsea suffered from the erosion of the coastline, which then silted up their harbour. So you can see now we're 2 miles from the sea. Yeah, once Rye was a port, a thriving port, and Winchelsea, the one that we're going to visit, was even more prosperous than Rye. And we'll talk about the whole history of that when we get down there. It's a fascinating day, fascinating history, and we'll go to Spike Milligan's grave as well. And the Cinque Ports date all the way back to the late Saxon period, believed to have been established at least by Edward Confessor in the early 1000s. But they declined significantly by the time of Elizabeth I. They still exist in a ceremonial sense. This appears to be the right way to go. You can go either way, but I'm going to stick as close to the river as possible before we get to Camber Castle. Ugh, I do love a castle. see the water levels here on the River Brede are healthy. One of the things I love about being down here is that sense of the relationship between England and France, with just that narrow strip of water between us, and we'll talk more about that in Winchelsea, with its role as a historic wine cellar of England. Looking out across the marshes, and you can see Camber Castle just in the distance there. Wow, this is such a powerful, evocative landscape, isn't it? No wonder so many writers and artists moved here. I love the way the wind dances on the water there. I've been really craving Cornish pasties recently, for a while actually. And they're not so easy to find in London these days since the demise of Percy Ingles. But here's the thing, I often prefer them cold. This one's cold from the bakery. There was a fancy pasty shop nearby, we could have got a hot one, but I think I prefer them cold. How do you prefer? Am I just weird? Top marks for the pasty, by the way. Really good pastry, great filling. Solid, £2.50 I think. I haven't really done so many walks outside London this year, or certainly not enough, which is a real shame. I've done a few, obviously, trips for family reasons and I've had a holiday, but I used to do a lot more, I think. I went back through the channel, and so I expect to see a few more excursions to places within easy reach of London between now and Christmas. I might even try and squeeze in a foreign jaunt as well for a couple of days. Who knows? I love the fact that the path to Camber Castle takes us alongside this ditch here, which I imagine as a defensive ditch rather than what it actually is, which is draining the marshes, I would say. This is a great relic here. This concrete shelter was for the crew that managed what was known as a starfish decoy that was set up here. An assembly of lights and fires set to trick returning Luftwaffe pilots into thinking they were flying over a burning town, and to drop any leftover bombs here instead of on Winchelsea or Rye Harbour. And this wall, this fragment of concrete wall, is the leftover from the generator that was used to power the decoy lights. Isn't that great? This is known as a Stanton shelter, after the place in Derbyshire where they were prefabricated. If you want an illustration of the degree to which the sea has retreated from the land here, Camber Castle was built to defend the harbours at Rye, particularly, and Winchelsea by Henry VIII. They started work, I think, in 1512 and continued up to around 1540 something, with the increased tensions with France making Henry anxious about potential French attack. And there was a French attack on the coast here in the 1530s. But you can see now, look, it's it's a good 1.5 miles or so to the coast. All around here now is marshy grazing land. It's fascinating, isn't it? And it was built originally as an artillery fort around that central circular tower you can see there. This is where I wish I had a drone, because it looks impressive from the air. I urge you to look up aerial photographs of it. There were 28 brass and iron cannons that were operated by a garrison of 28 men. Wow. You can almost hear the voice, can't you? Echoing down through time. I hope the sound of the wind whipping through here comes through on the audio, because it creates a really magical presence. Ghostly is too obvious, but it's accurate. If you listen carefully, you can hear voices in that wind. Voices from the past. And I like this here, this bit of English heritage plaque. Just repeats what I'd already said before about the dates. But this down here, it says, "Keep the story of England alive." That's interesting. I'm going to be doing I'll certainly make a video soon about early England, early London, and the continuation of that story. Onwards to Winchelsea. I can't stop looking back at Camber Castle. So it's very majestic and very, very romantic as well. The cows are laying down, which is usually a bad sign, means it's going to rain. Maybe they just had a hard day grazing. There's been a lot of talk in media and stuff about cow attacks, wasn't there? Like the amount of people that have been either have been injured or worse by cows. But I think as my dad said to me, the factor there that people don't take into account is they're usually dog walkers. So it's actually the dog that cows are protecting their calves from, not people. I don't know if that's correct or not. And that was the last clip they found on his camera. I'm not laughing about the tragic thing that's happened to other people. I'm just thinking, am I tempting fate by saying that? I don't have Rocky with me today. And I don't think many animals will feel threatened by Rocky, particularly now he's 13 and his back legs aren't working so well. And we've got a nice collection of badges here, the Saxon Shore Way, which is, I think, the path we've been following. I hope the path we've been following from Rye. And we've got the Royal Military Canal path coming up. Well, I think we're already on it. So we just go down here and then we turn into Winchelsea. So I better get my guidebook out. Bit of necessary road walking till we get to the historic heart of Winchelsea. This is an interesting stone just by the roadside here with some carvings on it. I wonder if I can find out more about it. So here we encounter the Royal Military Canal, which we've walked on a little bit before when we walked from Folkestone to Hythe, and that's the beginning of the Royal Military Canal that was built in the early 19th century. I think the date's 1802 to 1805, at the time when there was a great threat of invasion from Napoleon's France, and preparations were made along this coast to shore up the defences, and the military canal here was built to supply both troops and supplies to the fortifications along the south coast here. Right, wine is a very important part of the story of medieval Winchelsea, and actually as part of the contemporary story of this part of southern England, particularly the Kent side, you can actually do wine tours. There are vineyards around here, and I hear the wine's actually quite good. And it remains to be seen whether I'll make it to Winchelsea Beach today, but who knows? This is a really good view of the topography of Winchelsea, the steep hill that it was built upon to protect it from the tidal waters, which are far away now. It seems a good mile and a half to the sea. The Bridge Inn, which I shall have to look up in my guidebook once we have passed into the city walls. And a reminder that we're entering one of the Cinque Ports. Was it Cinque Ports? My French is terrible, isn't it? I'm going to work on it. This is a lovely old cottage here. So here we go, up the Strand, and this is a little bit different to the Strand in London where I was at the weekend. Wow, what a way to enter Winchelsea, through this imposing Strand Gate, a survivor of the original late 13th century structures, part of the old town wall and defences. And this is where the watch out was based, who would look out across the river to the sea. And in 1350 from here The watchout would have seen the battle between a Spanish fleet that was assembled to raid the south coast of England and a fleet that Edward III had assembled here of smaller boats, more agile boats, that defeated the Spanish fleet and captured 24 boats. And from here we get a view out to sea. When you look down from here, you realise it can't have been a lot of fun to drag those barrels of wine up from the River Brede up through this gate here. Yeah, and look, as David Clark says in his brilliant guidebook, you can still see the grooves of where the portcullis was housed there, ready to snap down on any unwelcome invaders. Look, you can come inside. I'm not sure if this is the correct cottage where Dame Ellen Terry lived from 1896 to 1906, the famous actress who apparently became a bit of a tourist attraction and helped encourage and set up the local amateur theatre. The reason makes me doubt that this is the one, apparently it's where the Duke of Wellington stayed as well whilst he was surveying the troops that were being assembled for the defence of the realm against Napoleon. I love it. This is the High Street, Winchelsea High Street. And I will try and follow David Clark's wonderful booklet here, and we can talk about the history as well. Here it is, A Walk Around Winchelsea by David Clark. Here we have a couple of really impressive buildings side by side. We have the town well, dating from 1851, after the original well sank into the ground, which is never a good thing. So this was put here, it's protected by this medieval looking stone archway to protect the water supply. And next to it we have a building that's now known as the Armoury. It was originally a pub called the Bear that has its origins in the 13th century and then later additions in the 14th and 15th century. I think we should go and sit in the churchyard here of St Thomas the Martyr and talk about the history of Winchelsea, the lost city, the wine cellars and all of that before we continue with our walk. The great Spike Milligan is buried somewhere near here. I like to think his gravestone should stick out a little bit. I wonder if it's that one over there surrounded by weeds. And here it is with some fresh flowers laid there, possibly by a fan. One of the great godfathers of British comedy, Spike Milligan. Terence Allen Milligan, 1918 to 2002. And Sheila Milligan as well. Without Spike Milligan, I don't think culture today would be the same. He changed the way we look at things, which is what great artists do. You can see people have left little offerings of stones and coins. That probably has significance of some description, doesn't it, I imagine? Before we can talk about medieval Winchelsea, we must first talk about old Winchelsea, the city that was swept away by the waters. And the name is said to derive from an Old English, Anglo-Saxon, meaning an island on the riverbed, a town that grew in the Appledore estuary and was a place known as a safe haven even in Roman times. The strategic advantage of this town built on a shingle bank, it just grew and grew in significance to at one point in the Middle Ages it grew to a town of about 5,000 people. Apparently there were over 50 inns, there was a sea wall to defend it. It was a massively prosperous trading port with the continent, to the extent that in David Clark's booklet here he says it was comparable to Southampton in London in its significance as a port. That's huge. William of Normandy landed here when he came back to put down a rebellion in 1067, and it's where the knights that came to kill St Thomas, who became St Thomas, Thomas of Becket, they landed their boats at Winchelsea. Hence the church here is dedicated to St Thomas the Martyr of Canterbury, which is interesting. It probably wasn't, building a town on a shingle bank was always going to have problems, and then there were a series of great storms that affected the town throughout the 13th century, culminating in a tragic storm that occurred, I'm going to check the date here actually, on the 4th of February 1287. It didn't just affect Winchelsea, it affected the entire coastline, shifting sand and gravel and silt down the coastline to catastrophic effect. It only took a year for Edward I to commission a new city to be built up here on the hill, safely away from the water, that was laid out on a grid system that is still here today. A grid system and a series of squares. If you look at it on a map, it's interesting to see it, and it's still here. There's still the same grid system here. A planned town, which is interesting, isn't it? A planned medieval town. And it says in numerous sources that it resembles in many ways an American city. And it's interesting that the population grew again to around 5,000 people. It was such a significant, prosperous trading port. Part of its prosperity was built around the fact it was used as a principal trading port for wine imported from Gascony, which at that point in the 14th century, late 13th century and 14th century was a British territory, British property. We have to remember our kings were still the kings of Normandy. The Dukes of Normandy at this point were still the kings of England. It's Henry V who is the first post-Norman monarch to speak English as his mother tongue, which is an interesting thought, isn't it? When we talk about people learning the language, our monarchs didn't. A lot of the Georges spoke German. And there are still a series of wine cellars in the city, well, it's now the town of Winchelsea, that are beneath the ground here, and they do tours of them. Unfortunately, they don't do them, they only do them at weekends, and you have to book quite a long time in advance. So I'm here on a Tuesday. So the French decided to raid the coastline in the 14th century, and Winchelsea was attacked a series of times, a number of times, despite its impressive defences. Eventually its prosperity started to decline to the extent that by 1575 there were only 60 households left here, and that decline kind of continued. There were a few increases. A military garrison came to the town in the 18th century, and we'll see some of that on the tour, but basically by the 19th century the population of Winchelsea had declined to around 500 people, 10% of what it had been at its peak. So you could say in some ways we have two lost cities of Winchelsea. The original one swept away by the sea, consumed by the waves, and the prosperous trading city that was here, built in its place, that sadly declined and became this unbelievably quaint little town. We're going to have a proper walk around the town. The church was open though, and it really is beautiful. So we'll go down Friary Lane, see if we can see the remains of Grey Friars Monastery. This grand old pile here is 19th century. I mean, trying to look medieval, but it does stand on the site of the 14th century Grey Friars Priory. It's all demolished, sadly, but apparently some of the cloisters and some other buildings are there within the grounds of this private residence. When you see it being all quiet and sleepy now, it's difficult to imagine it as the bustling trading port it would have been once upon a time, with around 5,000 inhabitants, which is kind of incredible, isn't it? I think at its peak it had 6,000. In more recent times it's attracted a number of famous residents, aside from Dame Ellen Terry's, where Ford Madox Ford lived. John Millais lived here, as well as Joseph Conrad. And this is the house where Ford Madox Ford lived. Helpful plaque just above the front door. This long road here leads to one of the gates at the far end of the town. It was through that gate that the French invaded once upon a time and did terrible damage in the town, killing many people. The French attacked in 1360 and did terrible damage in the town. I think they did damage to over 400 properties, which struggled to recover, and they committed various atrocities, killed lots of people. 300 horsemen of Sussex, says David Clark, came to the rescue, and hundreds of French soldiers were killed. The number quoted here is 300, and they also lost 2 ships. And beneath this tree here, this beautiful tree, there's a plaque which tells us that John Wesley preached his last open-air sermon here on the 7th of October 1790, and there is a Wesley chapel. First left and left again direction, so that's quite funny. We will go that way on our way back to Rye, I think. This looks like a meaningful collection of objects left on this bench here. How Village Churches Thrive, The Invisible Man DVD, and some garments. That might be some sort of tribute to somebody, maybe. The New Inn over here, and a plaque over the door has the date of 1776, which I think is a significant date in the United States of America, isn't it? There you go. This inn dates from around that time. And opposite we have this really beautiful medieval building here, the Court Hall, parts of which date from the 13th century at the time of the building. So one of the original buildings of New Winchelsea, although heavily restored in the 16th century. I love it when people say that as if, oh well, that's quite recent, being the 1500s. What an incredible view, looking out towards Dungeness. And David Clark says on a clear day you can see Boulogne, but maybe today's not clear enough, or maybe I'm looking in the wrong direction. It is a really fine view across the Brede Valley, isn't it? Wow. And is that dark hill in the distance? Is that Boulogne? Surely not. And this street here, North Street, would have had the city wall running along to the left. And apparently the story goes it's where Edward I nearly came to an untimely end in 1297 when he was inspecting the town wall. His horse got spooked by a nearby windmill. Edward then urged the horse to carry on because it wouldn't move, at which point it got particularly peeved and jumped over the parapet of the town wall, falling into the fields below. Somehow they both survived, although Edward did then sell the horse. And here is another of the medieval gates, this one built in 1404 after the French destroyed the original one. And David Clark says it's here, by this gate, that Edward I had his narrow escape after his horse got spooked and leapt over the wall. So we'll just do another lap of the town, go along the city wall here at North Street, and then we'll do the 1066 country walk back to Rye and have a pint in the Mermaid before getting the train back to London. The town did enjoy another burst of prosperity in the 18th century when they imported some linen workers, and they had a period of time of doing well from the linen trade. 2 plaques side by side here, Malcolm Saville, the children's author, and Asa Briggs. And I was just wondering where all the cellars are, and look, here we have a remnant here. It's a National Trust plaque here, and it says it's the Salutation Cellar. I stood straight on that. I could have gone all the way through if I wasn't lucky. Well, that cellar wasn't in my booklet. So what other treasures lie still to be discovered? This house here dates from the 15th century, and apparently it has a fine vaulted cellar which dates from 1290, from the original new Winchelsea. And to stand corrected, the book does mention the cellar over there on the other side, just under this entry here. And I think that is the cellar entrance just there. So this is one side of Barrack Square, where the Duke of Wellington billeted 500 men and their families here during the Napoleonic Wars. Previously The houses here were for Huguenot linen workers in the 18th century. And here at the stone house we have another cellar. And we've come back to the high street where we entered the town. So now I guess we either make a decision. I have a train ticket from Winchelsea back to London, so I could just have a pint here and get the train, or we walk back to Rye. Decisions. What will I do? When I was a kid, there was an animated show where you had to guess whether the character, what flavour milkshake he was going to have. I think he was a frog from memory. So when I say things like, you know, what will I do? Will I have a pint here or will I do? It reminds me of that. And you'd have to guess. There was a little ticker on the screen. Do you remember? What was that called? I'm not making that up. I'm pretty sure I'm not making that up. These ruins here on the edge of the town look significant, and I will look them up when I get home. And just on one side of what I'm guessing is one of the entrances to whatever this building was, we have the entrance to the cellars padlocked up, and those look relatively new padlocks as well. I guess people are still tempted to go down there for a route around. And here is Wesley's Chapel. No, I'm gonna go back to Rye. My walk is far from done today, although I'm going to take a slightly more direct route, I hope, if I can find the footpath. So we're going to go through the Pipewell Gate, or the Ferry Gate, and hopefully there's a footpath just to the right which takes a more direct route across the marshes back to Rye. This is the Edward I story. This is a charming lane. It does tempt me to take the slightly longer route, but I think I may regret that. And here we meet the River Brede again. And as long as I keep this to my right, I should be okay and should get back to Rye. And here's the public footpath heading that way. Hopefully well marked. I've suddenly got doubts about my ability to navigate an unmarked path. I'm tempted to turn back and go the other way, but look, on the hill there, that's Rye, and I just used my phone to take a photo and zoom in. That looks like a bridge over the ditches. That's the problem, there's so many ditches cutting across these fields. But it is straight ahead. Look, actually, I can see some footprints across the fields of that bridge. That feels like a result, that there is a bridge here and there's a sign, and I think on the other side there is actually a marked path. You might think, you know, what's the big deal? Well, I can't tell you how many times that hasn't been the case. It's an interesting feeling walking away from Winchelsea. Such a magical place. I'm not sure I've been to a place like that where people are living within the footprint and the fabric of this essentially lost medieval city. Now it's quite a quaint little town, beautiful houses, not really a lot there apart from the houses, pub, shop, cafe, church, some lovely houses though. And the idea that it was a place that at its peak had 6,000 people, that is really magical, really magical. All those little fragments of medieval buildings dating from the end of the 13th century, beginning of the 14th century. It's amazing. It's quite unlike anywhere else I've been like that. Rye is amazing, but Rye I think is largely Tudor. So, and later obviously, but yeah, what a magical place. I'm so glad I came back to do that. Haven't got anywhere near the sea, but I'm not disappointed. And I love the way this path snakes across the land to the distant hill with the town perched atop. More magic of the day. Wow, this is beautiful, isn't it? So glad I decided to do this as a circular walk. I bought a train ticket, a return to Winchelsea, so I'm so glad I decided to get off at Rye and do a longer walk. An interesting angled stile here, which you think they could have put it where the gate is maybe, but nope. Something really magical about approaching a town across the fields at sunset. Feels like it's been too long since I've done this. I've been too ensconced within London. It's time to break out a bit more. This great little farm track here takes us back into Rye and hopefully straight to the front door of the Mermaid Inn. Back across the River Tillingham, where I was at the start of my walk. I don't know, how long ago was that? 5 hours ago perhaps? And here we are, back at Mermaid Street. How wonderful. What an incredible walk that was. What an incredible journey back into the past, looking for the lost medieval city of Winchelsea, and the city that is there today, the town that's there today with those medieval fragments, just incredible. And here I am walking up this beautifully preserved street, this medieval Tudor street, for a pint at the Smugglers Inn, the Mermaid Inn, used by smugglers, you know what I mean. It's not called the Smugglers Inn, it's called the Mermaid. It was a Smugglers Inn. Smugglers gang. So I'm going to sign off here. Thanks so much for joining me on this walk today. It's a magical, magical walk. Thanks so much to my supporters on Patreon, the YouTube members and yourselves for coming here each week and joining me on these walks. Hope the Mermaid's open. So as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing the next walk wherever that may be. And within one, if it's not the new river, then there'll be one more sign off before it is, if you know what I mean.
It's over the meadow, over the stream, it's where I am going and where I have been. It's been a long day now.
The Mermaid was full up, so I'll have to try and see if I can get a seat at the old bell.